do a little bit, yeah, thank you. I do have a little bit of a soft voice, but you know, again, if you can't hear me, just let me know. But again, I want to thank Kay and Carol and everybody involved with this project for giving me the opportunity to introduce our family to you. Now, some of you are family members. In fact, we're all one big family, of course. But some of you are closer to me in relation than others. So I know some of the faces, like Dave. We had an opportunity to meet before. We have Joseph Morgan in common. But just to give you an idea of how my family got started here, how our story started here, and then how it affected me to finally hear the stories that were about our family. So just bear with me a little bit. And if I talk too fast, I'm sorry. That's the Californian in me. I was born and raised there, and when I get excited, I start talking really fast. So if I'm getting too fast, just please bear with me. I'll try and be slow down a little bit, so that way you can understand what I'm trying to get across. So as I mentioned before, I'm from Los Angeles, originally born and raised. My family, I thought for the longest time, was from Los Angeles. And it wasn't until we moved to Katy, Texas, that I found out that our family was not from California. Right? So they threw a party for us, a going-away party, and a family friend says, "Oh, you're going back to your roots, huh? You're going back to Texas?" And I was like, "No, our family's from Los Angeles. We're all from California. We're from California." Like, no. Your grandmother was born in Bastrop, Texas. And, okay, and I just mentally filed that. So then we had an opportunity to go on vacation to the Dominican Republic. Now, growing up in Los Angeles, it's a very, very diverse place to live. People, different cultures, different languages. So I took 3 years of Spanish, and I call it functional Spanish. I'm not conversational, but I'm functional. So if they dropped me off in a Spanish-speaking country, I'd be okay. I'd have no problem. And so we took this trip to the DR, and as we're walking around, of course, when you're at a resort, the people are like, "Oh, yes, welcome, sir. What have you? Do you need anything to drink or anything like that?" And then I break out a little bit of my Spanish on them, and then they go, "Oh, okay," and they start talking to me a little bit of Spanish. And that was when we were in the group. But when I was by myself, they would pull me aside and they go, "Hey, primo, ¿de dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres?" And I go, I'm just a regular old black guy from Los Angeles. And they go, no, su familia, ¿de dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres? They're asking me where my family's from. I'm like, "No, we're from Los Angeles." So that sparked me, you know what, maybe I am Dominican. Maybe I am Cuban or Puerto Rican or something like that. So I said, let me go ahead and start diving in to this history thing and see what I can find. And coupled with that curiosity is my love for history. I love histories, and not because of the facts involved. I like the stories. I think everybody has a story, and when you understand the story of people, it makes you more empathetic, and it makes you have genuine concern and love for other people. So what I found as I've gone through this process of finding out about my family, I've become more empathetic of other people that I come in contact with, because I find that everybody is the same. We all want to be loved. We all want to be cared for. We all want our families to be okay. We just want to be able to enjoy life. And so the stories that I was able to uncover helped me to see that. And so now I can see that in other people's lives as well. So I just want to share a few pictures as I talk about this. And I'm sure they'll appear up on the screen here. So this was the foundation here. So this is a picture of my grandmother and grandfather. Of course, he's Grundy. Where's my Grundy? There. My cousin's right here. There are other Grundys. But yeah, that's Lois and Ben Grundy. Now, Lois is the one I was speaking of, who was born right here in Bastrop. In fact, right up here on Old McDade Road, off of 95 right here, at the Morgan farm right there. She was born on that farm, back in 1920. And of course, she married my grandfather, and she loved her family. And of course, just like everyone else, everybody has a really close family. Most people have a close family, but she really, really loved her family. To the point to where before there was air travel, they would drive from California up to Bastrop to visit the family. And vice versa, the family from here will go out to Los Angeles to visit. In fact, I don't know, anyone in here know Belinda Davis? Anybody familiar with her? Of course, her son, everybody, Belinda. So we're cousins, and so when I finally met her face to face, she told me about all my family because she was one of the ones who used to make that trek. She was like, I remember your grandmother, I remember your great-grandfather, I remember all of these different people. So it was really, really fascinating. But it was that desire to be with family that made them make those long trips in the car. Probably back when you didn't have air conditioning, going through the desert, it's 12 hours from here to El Paso, in the middle of nowhere, where it's hot. But they did that because they wanted to be with the family. And so this picture here is one of those trips. And you kind of see that that's Richard McDonald there on the tractor. But the kids on there, those are my grandmother's children at the time. So the two girls on the front, that's my Aunt Charlene and my Aunt Miley. And the name Miley, we'll come back to that, see why that's significant. But then the two older gentlemen, the two older guys, those are my uncles Byron and Norman. And that little guy sitting in the seat, that's my dad, Leslie Sr. So they all made that trip to Bastrop as a family. And it was important for them, again, to get the family involved, get the children to know that their family was here and that their family was important to them. That's why they made those trips. So now, as far as family is concerned, with how we wound up in Los Angeles. Now this is an interesting story. So now Bryce might be a familiar name to you here at Bastrop, but this here, we call him Papa Bryce, but this is David Bryce here in the middle, and these are all of his children and their spouses. So of course you can see here on the end, here's my grandmother and my grandfather. But of the children, at least 4 of them were born right here in Bastrop, as David was. And unfortunately, his wife, my great-grandmother, she died very young. She was about 37 years old when she died. But he still had to raise these kids. So you can see that they all are very beautiful, and you see that they look like they've done okay for themselves. So he did a pretty good job raising them. But this is a picture of my great-grandmother, Miley Morgan Bryce. So I said that name Miley would be interesting. My Aunt Miley, who was on the tractor, she's named after our great-grandmother. And you can see she has a horn on her lap. She was an excellent musician. She played the horn, she played the drums, and she also played piano. And she loved music, and she passed that love of music on to her children. Even though they didn't have her very long, she did pass that love for music, then also too for spiritual things as well to the family. So going back to this, you can see how David, even though it wasn't easy for him, he did what he had to do. So one of the things that he had to do is a funny story of why we wound up in Los Angeles. So back in the 20s, around Prohibition, he was a farmer, but he was also a bootlegger. Right? So, he probably had to have a little fun, right? Everybody, we always like to say nowadays, we say, even though you have a job, you always have to have a side hustle, right? So he had a side hustle, he was a bootlegger, right? But he did go to jail for 2 years for bootlegging. But then he got out, and I guess he decided he wanted to take up being a merchant. So he was selling different items and things, to people throughout the community. And so a family came to him, a white family who had a horse that was sick. And so they was like, we want you to give us some vitamins. So he sold them some vitamins. Well, the horse died. And needless to say, they didn't like that. They weren't very happy about that. So he literally had to just shoot on out of town. And where he landed was in Los Angeles. And so he stayed there for a few more years until he had enough money to get the rest of the kids and my great-grandmother Miley out to Los Angeles, and then that's where our story began, as far as our wing is concerned. But it doesn't stop there, because our roots are still here in Bastrop. And so, of course, again, that's my great-grandmother Miley, and her maiden name was Morgan, and these are her parents. This is Richard and Katie Morgan. Now, Richard was a preacher, but he was also a teacher, and that's actually how they met. She was actually one of his pupils. So now, Katie was born into slavery to the Brigham family. I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with the Brigham family. I believe some of them are from this area, but also too over in Blanco, Texas. How you say it? Blanco, Texas. But she was born to her mother, who was a slave, and what we believe is the eldest son of the Brighams of that generation. In fact, Howard New helped me do some of this research, and he had mentioned, I guess, Ben Brigham, who she actually lists as her father on her death certificate. He's the one who raised her, but it's believed that one of his older brothers was actually her father. And then sad, of course, right after she was born, they sold her mom. But they took her in and they treated her like she was one of their own. So she made sure she got educated, and that was one of the reasons why they encouraged her to court Richard, because he was an upstanding man, he had values, and he was educated. And in fact, he got his education while he was enslaved. But he was a very good man, and so they encouraged him to date, and then they got married. And to their reunion was several children, including, as I mentioned, alluded to, Belinda Davis, her grandmother, Virgie McDonald, and my great-grandmother, Miley, were sisters. But this story is so fascinating. Even Katie, she was a midwife. And so a lot of the children, a lot of the African-American children that were born around the time where she was a nurse, she delivered them. And then, if they were sick or what have you, so she was one of the best nurses in the area. And so you can see that they had a love for the community, but also for their family. And as far as their legacy is concerned, of course, it starts that we know with Joseph Morgan. And of course, in here, and then also too in the other wing of the museum, you can see the story of Joseph Morgan, how he told the story that he would rather go live in a hole in the ground than to go back and work on a plantation, to work for anybody. So that's what he did. So right over here in this creek over here, off of Old McDade, he dug a hole in the side of that creek, and he stayed there until he had enough money to get the rest of his family and buy more land and sell them right there. He sold charcoal and vegetables in order to make enough money to do that. So very resourceful. But that resourcefulness he passed down to his children. Of course, he was also a very spiritual man. He helped in the founding of the AME Church on help me out, Walnut? It's a Walnut, right? Yeah, on Walnut. So he was into helping people, of course, spiritually, but also too to help them to better themselves. And he was a shining example of himself, being able to do what he can to take care of him and his family. And so, of course, he passed that on to my family, and that's why I'm here now, because of how resourceful and how courageous that they were despite the odds, despite all the things that they had to go through, the difficult life that they had, we're still here. And we still have an opportunity to tell our story and share that with you. But another person I want to introduce you to, because again, my great-grandfather, David Bryce, an interesting story that I was able to unearth, which wasn't very difficult, is the story of Amanda Bryce. Now, she spells her, I spelled it B-R-I-C-E, but in all of the records, she's listed with a B-R-Y-C-E. And the reason why that is because she was married to Paul Bryce, who was brought here from Mississippi to work at the Bryce and Lyman Sawmill. And so that's how we got that last name Bryce. So somewhere after maybe like 3 or 4 generations after emancipation, the spelling changed from the Y to the I in Bryce. But her story has been chronicled. Actually, they did a project back in the 1930s, the slave narratives, to where they actually interviewed former slaves about their life and things that they experienced. And her story is so interesting because she was right here in Bastrop, but she was owned at some point by Louis Ehlers. And I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of this house right here, but if you go one block over here to the Catholic Church where the rectory stands right now, this house was in that spot. And so she lived and grew up in that house. And it was kind of the same situation with her as it was with Katie, and that they treated her like she was their own. And so she could just go wherever she wanted to go. She didn't need a pass. So this picture here, this is actually the storefront here, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's right across the street. This was actually where the store that Mr. Ehlers owned was right there. Of course, they had a fire and it burned down. This is a facade, but she stood right there. She walked up and down Main Street, right up here in front of the courthouse. She was right there. So I feel like I get the opportunity to walk in her footsteps in a literal sense because she walked up and down the street. But again, her story is so fascinating because she talked about her children. She talked about the things that she endured. She even somehow found her way in a stagecoach with Sam Houston. It was an interesting story. So of course, because she was a servant, the family, the Ehlers family, they all couldn't fit in the stagecoach together. And so when they would go to LaGrange, they would send her ahead to get things ready. And so she gets on the stagecoach, she steps in, and she said because she was so small, she had to sit in between people. And she found herself between Sam Houston and someone she identified as Colonel Boston. I don't know if anybody knows who that might be. But she found herself sitting right there. And you think about, we think about famous people, you think about all the people that you've met before that are famous. I mean, who could be more famous than Sam Houston? Right? So I thought it was just such a wonderful fact that she had the opportunity to do that, to cross paths with him. But her story is goes even deeper. She says that her life as a slave was actually better than when she was free. And here's why: because she could do whatever she wanted to do. She stayed in the house. She ate the same thing everybody else did. She got treated like a member of the family. When she was emancipated, now she had to go work out in the fields. And she said she wasn't a very good convict. She was not very good. So she was saying that her life was a whole lot easier then. And when you look at it, the way that she tells that story, you can see why. She had so many different things that she overcame. Like for instance, she was part of a family dispute, believe it or not. And again, I mentioned Howard New. He's such a good guy. I don't know if you guys know Howard, but he helped me find some wonderful facts. But she became the product of a family dispute. The family, the Ware family, they moved from Georgia, and they brought her and her mom and her sister along. And so the father bequeathed all of this property to his daughter and his two sons. His two sons were underage; they were minors, so they couldn't inherit anything yet. But she was older, and she also married his lawyer, who was the executor of everything. So they got married. They took care of everything, and the sons grow up. And they're like, okay, we're of age. Where's our money? Where's our stuff? They're like, we don't have it. They're like, no. So they actually sued their sister and their brother-in-law. And part of the dispute was Amanda. And so this record here, because they had to list all the assets. And of course, at that time, slaves were listed as assets. So listed on here is her mother, Sally, 28 years of age, or $800. Her 9-year-old sister, Rhoda, was $500, and then Amanda was 3 years old. She was $300. See, so you think about how, we have people being treated as property, but then how still that wasn't enough to break the spirit completely to where they just completely gave up on everything. Because she lived a very long life, a productive life after that. And again, just like the Morgans and the Bryces and the other folks, they just continue to persevere to make us who we are today. So that's pretty much it as far as my family is concerned. I can go up here and talk. I have so many more stories I can tell you. So many different things. In fact, we were talking to the Grundys here, but how I got my last name is a totally different story. We don't have time to talk about that. If you want to know afterwards, just come up and ask me. It's really fascinating. But I did want to say, again, just to reiterate, that it takes, to me, I think it takes courage in order to really go into your family history, because you may uncover some things that you may not have expected, and you have to be prepared for that. But it's so wonderful, it's so freeing, and it makes you have so much more love for your family than you already have, because you can see that they're people, and they had different circumstances, they had different situations that they had presented with them, and they did the best that they could. And it also will help you to see how we are one big family. Like, to me, I just introduced you to another wing of your family, because to me, I think we all have one common ancestor. And so by you knowing this part of your family and getting to know your other closer relatives in your family is going to help you grow in love for everyone, and it's going to make us more empathetic, and it's going to make us more, I don't want to say civil. It would just really make your life so much better, just knowing, because what you'll be able to remember and you'll be able to see is that each person, it's not just a name, it's not just the date that they were born and the date that they died, but they were an individual, and they have a story, and that story is important. It's just as important as your story, and it needs to be told. And so I just encourage you, if you are doing the Family History Project, just keep going, don't stop, because you will enrich your life by everything that you learn. Thank you very much. And I guess if you have any questions, I mean, I can ask some questions. Sure. Mike?
So did you meet any new cousins in the process of doing your research here?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I was trying to get as creative as I possibly could, because again, a lot of that generation kind of died off. So I've just been doing paperwork, doing research online and going to the courthouse, places like that. So I had an ingenious idea one day, Juneteenth a couple of years ago. I knew that everybody would be in downtown, so I made a sign and I put all the surnames of my family, and I put at the top, "Are we related?" And I just walked around with that sign, walking up to people, showing them the sign. They look at the sign, they go, "No." And they look again, they go back and look, like, "Why are you asking?" It's like, "Oh, I'm doing a family history project." "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I know so, such. And that's actually how I got to meet Babe McFarland here. Turns out that Joseph Morgan, we have that ancestor in common. She descends from his son Ples Morgan, but Richard, her brother. That's how I got a chance to come across her. And another thing that I did, again, this is me thinking like a Californian. If you want to find people and you want to, get the who's who and who's what, where do you go? Church or the barbershop. So I was up in Elgin, and I crossed the tracks, and there was a barbershop right there, right across from the Civic Center there. And I walk in, and I'm looking around at everybody, just kind of just listening. They're talking about football, and they're laughing, and they're giving each other the business. And then finally they stop and they ask, like, "Do you need help?" And I go, "Oh no, I'm just listening. He's like, "Okay." That's where I was like, "Well, I'm doing a family history project, and I'm looking for some family members." And he says, "Okay, well, what are their names?" I said, "Well, for Morgan, Bryce, Russell. Do you know any of them?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, don't you know so and so? Yeah, because that's my aunt." And he goes, "Oh well, yeah, that's my nephew, and then he's married such. And then they go all around. So now they take over the conversation, and they're just going for like 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, we finally realized that either by blood or by marriage, I'm related to everybody in that room. So I thought that was just so cool. So I got some information, and that helped me actually to overcome another obstacle that I was having in my research. And so just being creative was it really helped me to overcome that, and I was able to start moving on and finding more information. In fact, there's another cousin who lives, if you go through the light at 290 and go maybe like 3 or 4 houses, her name is Robinelle Bryce. She's descended from Manch Bryce, who was also another teacher in the Sayreville area. He was married to Blanche Hennington, and his son T.F. Bryce was her father. But I had an opportunity to talk to him. Had no idea we existed. that whole Bryce wing in Los Angeles. She had no clue. But so Madge Bryce and my great-great-grandfather were brothers. And that's how we're able to find that information. So it's amazing when you find people that you're related to, and you have that commonality. It just instantly makes you warm up to them. You know, so every time I see something or I see a name somewhere, I go, oh, where are they? Oh, let me see if I'm related to them. Try to see, so where's your family from? Where are they from? I'm like, oh, okay, they're from Texas. Okay. I always try and quiz them, then I go, okay, right. But it's fascinating when you do. You know, you can find that connection. And it just makes your world get so much bigger. So thank you for that question, man. Appreciate that. So I think I'm done, right? Does everybody have any questions?
Well, I want to say thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just curious if you found out what happened to Amanda's mother and sister that were in that dispute.
Yeah, so
did they stay in the area? Did she see them still?
Yeah, actually, so what happened after emancipation, because they were separated, after emancipation, Sally was owned by the Heron family. So after emancipation, she came all the way from McDade to get Amanda, and she took her back. And so the family was able to reunite. I'm not sure if they were able to find Rhoda as well, because I don't know what happened to her. But as far as Amanda and Sally, they did get back together. Yeah, so that was really nice that they had an opportunity to do that. And she said the same thing about her mom too, because I guess her mom maybe had the same job. She was like, yeah, mom wasn't that great of a kind of baker either, so maybe that ran in the family, I don't know. Yes?
Did you use any particular internet website to do your research?
Yes. I use several websites, of course, Ancestry.com. I used Family Search. There were a few Texas websites that Howard New turned me on to. I forget the names of them, but I can get you the names of those. The DNA helped a lot. It really helped a lot because it links you to other people who have made trees, and you can see where your common ancestor is. And then that'll help you. In some cases, they've already done the research for you. So all you have to do is just copy what they did. But it's a valuable resource. And I know 23andMe is another one that's popular. But to me, if you're really looking for the history of it, because if you're a DNA nut and you really are, you want to get down into the segments, the actual 23 chromosomes and everything like that, 23andMe is for you. But if you're interested in the history part of it, Ancestry by far is the best because they have all the records. And they have new records that come available all the time, things that you didn't know before.
There's also 15 million people in the Ancestry database.
Yes, there's that too. Yeah, the people that pop up and it's amazing. Again, another story I have that I could tell you about how we even found my sister's biological father who we had been looking for since she was a kid. It was an amazing story. Yeah, you have a question?
Do you know what ships or what port of entry your ancestors came from Africa?
I'm not sure, and that's one of the difficult parts about African American history research is because of the way that they have been listed in census records and other records, you really haven't had the names attached to them. Even in some cases, they've had their names changed. So like for instance, in one record we found Amanda's mother listed as Sarah, as opposed to Sally. So it can be very difficult, unless you have someone who has done an oral history and has passed that down, and somebody who has taken that information, that would be very, very difficult. But for the most part, most of the points of entry were on the East Coast, so that'd be like Virginia, the Carolinas and places like that. So in fact, Ancestry has a really good section. When you do your DNA, they have where they kind of break it down to ports of origin, and you can see how a lot of people, a lot of African Americans can trace their roots back to the Carolinas and to Virginia, because that's where a lot of them were brought in, and then they were dispersed throughout the country from that point. Yeah, so I haven't been able to get too far back. On my European side, I can go all the way back to like 1600s.
Wow.
Through the Brigham family. I can go all the way to the 1600s. But as far as the African Americans, it's very, very difficult.
The latest ethnicity release from Ancestry has broken down the African continent into more precise areas, which is helpful.
Yeah. So you can get, the regions that you're from, but as far as like being able to say like this person was in Georgia, and then they were brought in through this port in Virginia from Angola or from Sierra Leone or something like that. That's really difficult to find out. But they can tell you the general area where you're from.
So you can really go back to the origination from your family in Africa?
No, I haven't been able to trace back in individuals, but as far as the ethnicity, yes. Yes, you can get the ethnicity. And so if you're looking at the map that they put together for you on the DNA chart, you can see that a lot of it is all that west coast of Africa where the slave trade happened. So a lot of those little countries right there were with the origin where a lot of people of African Americans. All right. Then that's it. Thank you so much for hearing my story. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I should do more.
No, this is
Thank you for
perfect,
being
yes.
here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. All right, thank you so much.